Can you hear me in the back? Okay, good. All right, let's not give it like. Sorry. Oh my gosh, hold on. Okay. 2 minutes, and then we'll get started. 2 minutes. Cell phone. Yeah. 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 All right. Okay. Can you hear me? All right. So, first of all, thank you for coming. I did this on purpose. I didn't do that. Are any Jet fans here? So you don't have to watch the game tonight? That's why we're doing it. I'm going to take this off. This is not going to work. Hello. Okay. This happened when the staff came back from the summer. I had that on for like 3 seconds. So first of all, thank you for taking your time to come spend with me for the next hour. I'm going to say I'd like to have you out of here by 8:30. I think it's really important that I value your time. And not only that, for those of you who may have come to the first meet and greet, I wanted to make sure I did do the same thing. So what I'm about to share with you this evening is some of the slides that I shared with our staff when they came back at the end of August. And I think it's important because some of you may have questions about, potentially what am I looking to do for this year? What are my thoughts about X, Y, and Z? For the most part, I'm laying it all out. So the only ground rules I'm going to ask, if it's at all possible, and it's just a request, is that for the hour that you were trapped with me, I'm going to ask that any questions that you had at the end, or that you're thinking about, I'm thinking around 10 after 8 is when I'll pass the microphone over to you if you have any questions about anything, okay? And none of this would happen if it wasn't for the Board of Education. We have some trustees who are here tonight. So you are a trustee. I see we have a few of them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see Emily. I see Dave. I see Rachel, Nora. We have Beth. And then, of course, we have our esteemed trustee, Deborah, over here. And none of this would be possible without any of them. So without further ado, let me talk about the purpose of tonight. Tonight serves, I would say, a few, I want to say, purposes. One is, I'm hoping that you get to know that not only do I deeply care about your children, our students, but especially after Saturday, I really care about our community. Pride at Work was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. And that was just absolutely amazing. I also want to talk about perspectives, because some of the things I'm about to share with you may land on you, and you may go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Some of them may be like, I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm wondering what he's thinking and feeling. But I feel for our school district to go from here to up here, I'm going to ask us to suspend certainty about a few things, and let's focus on what can be, which I think is great. I also want to talk about what's happening not only here in Port Washington, but what are some of the things that are taking place internationally, nationally, and even somewhat locally around New York State. What can we learn from different places? And then I want to dig somewhat deeply into what is the purpose of education. For the most part, if you think about it, we rarely as educators have time to talk about why we do what we do. aside from the fact that by law we have to educate kids to a certain age, the real question becomes, what is the real purpose of students, children, and adults after some time spending 14,000 hours in the system? What do we want to happen after that takes place? Then I'm going to talk about insights. In order for me, I believe, to make very well-informed decisions, I try to the best of my ability to look at all different perspectives. The most important perspective is the life of a student, from pre-K all the way to 12th grade. So at some point throughout the year, my intention is to shadow students and understand what they are going through, use those experiences, and then make recommendations to our wonderful Board of Education. And then finally unpack what the plan is for the rest of this year. So, just very quickly, for those of you who don't know too much about me, I've had the wonderful pleasure of serving in multiple capacities. I've said this many times. I started out as a substitute teacher, and I haven't recovered. And that is probably one of the hardest jobs there is by far. But then as I moved up, I became a teacher assistant, and you see things from a different perspective at that level when you're working under a master teacher, almost like an apprentice, right? As an assistant, teacher aide, I was a teacher at the elementary level for quite a few years. 3rd grade, 4th grade, was in 1st grade for a while. I learned a lot, not only about children, a lot about myself. Became an assistant principal. I've been a principal at all 3 levels at some point. You're probably going, how the heck is that possible? He's only 28 years old. There's no way I can be doing all that stuff. But it's true. Even if I was in that position for a short period of time, I think the important thing is that at least I understood, or I can see where things are from that perspective. In Plain Edge, which is not too far from here, I was an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. That is my love. I love curriculum and instruction and assessment, very much so. And then I became superintendent in Shelter Island, which is about as big as this auditorium. Only 250 kids, K through 12, graduating class of 18 to 20. We had a bubble of 27. That's right. 27 graduation took 2.5 hours. I am not kidding. I know it's quicker here. So when you work in a very small system, you are still responsible for all of those things that take place in the school district. And that has allowed me, I think, to flourish in some ways, and to learn, and to grow, and to make mistakes. When I first went to Shelter Island, the business official went on to a different position. I was the business official for 1 year. I will never forget that as long as I live. I think I lost 25 pounds. But again, from a financial standpoint, I now understand school budgets. I can talk about them. Not as good as my colleague in the business office here, of course, with Mrs. Callahan. But I can tell you, I understand budgeting, for sure. I served as a superintendent in Patrick Medford. Now I am extremely thankful to be here with all of you. I have a family, believe it or not. I have 5 beautiful children. One just went to, I say 5, and I see people like going like this. I joke around about this all the time. People are like, are you Amish? Are you, what's going on? But I'm going to tell you, my age ranges, for those psychologists here, they were in Piaget's all 4 stages at one point. My youngest is 4 in pre-K. My oldest just went to Portland to become a teacher. My wife, who I'm asking to be synced at some point, is an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction in Sachem, the 2nd largest suburban school district in New York State. 15 schools, around 15,000 kids. Makes us look like Shelter Island in some ways. The question becomes, how do you balance that? So the reason why I'm sharing this is, for the working parents, that family balance is so important, not only for you, for me, but for everybody who touches the lives of our kids. That balance is extremely important, and I will talk about that and thread it through as far as school system balance as well. So that's my kids waking me up this summer, my 2 little ones. My 6 and my 4-year-old my 6-year-old, her name is Sadie. So that's her right there on the left. For those of you who know anything about my family, she happens to have Down syndrome. So now as a special education parent, I understand, I believe, what it's like to be on the other side of the table when you are advocating for your child. And I do a lot of things with my 2 little ones that my wife shouldn't know about. That's why I hashtag don't tell mom. I do a lot of stuff with my kids that she probably wouldn't approve, but I love doing it anyway. And I do it every Saturday morning. That is my ritual with my 2 little ones, because we know how quickly our children grow up. So I'm going to go back. This year, I only have a few things I really want to focus on. A lot of them have to do with listening. And what I mean by listening, we know there's a distinct difference between hearing and listening, right? Listening is a real discipline where you are suspending certainty, your thoughts about when someone's talking to you, right? I call it the download. You're downloading how you want to respond to somebody. You're not doing that if you're truly listening. And that's what I'm trying to do to the best of my ability over the past 2 months and certainly over the next several years. But I have to understand our culture. I want to understand the climate that's here and the history. At some point, I want to assist in developing a very clear vision, a mission, our core values, and then at some point, figuring out what a graduate profile looks like and working together as a school community. Not just some parts of our school community, but as much as we can bring together. The eclectic mix that makes Port Washington so special. I shared this slide because it's very interesting. When you see this, you can see potentially 2 different words. Raise your hand if you see good. Raise your hand if you see evil. Evil people leave right now. We don't want you. No, I'm just kidding. It does come down to the way we see things, and the way we see things become our reality. That is a common thing that happens to life for sure. In some ways, we look at force blinders as blocking a lot of things out that may potentially be very good for us. And some of those things may be right in front of our face. And all I'm asking for us to do is to think about the possibilities of what can be, what would that look like, and what can we do collectively as a community to make those things happen. So the first person I want to talk about is Jack Ma, who just retired from Alibaba days ago. Jack Ma is someone I think is not only brilliant, but he's a former teacher. He's a former teacher who talks about how he tried things over and over again and failed often when he did it. So much so, when he tried to work for Kentucky Fried Chicken in China, he actually wasn't hired. Not once, but 14 times. This gentleman talks about things and thinks about things from a different perspective. And one of his quotes has to do with knowledge-based learning and what he feels children need to know and understand in order for them to compete globally. What does that look like? And he talks about us and the workforce, the future workforce, competing against machines. And the reality is, humans in many ways can't compete against machines. He postulates that we have to, as a school, as a classroom, as teachers, how do we create experiences that are different for our kids? Because it's speculated by 2030, robots, for the most part, will probably replace almost 800 million jobs. 2030 is not far away. And what I talk about often is the fact that, for the most part, our school system has been operating the same way, for the most part, since the Industrial Revolution. You've probably heard this many, many times, right? An assembly line. Everything is standardized. Everything fits within a box. So, again, when we talk about perspectives and trying things that are new and different, I'm asking us as a community to potentially think about what can we do that maybe we haven't done before. If you care about what Google looks for, some of you may care, some of you may not, but I don't think it's just Google. What are the attributes that they look for, or other companies look for? I hate the term soft skills, but for the most part, they look at things that are extremely important that can be taught in school, but I'll talk about divergent and convergent thinking, right? And basically, from a convergent thinking textbook, I guess if I'm trying to contextualize it, you're looking at something about being a good coach. Right? You're not going to buy a workbook on being a good coach and then fill in bubble sheets. Communicating and listening well. These are experiences that every child can benefit from. Possessing insights into others. Looking at multiple points of view and not getting angry or upset, and actually listening to a different perspective without you getting riled up and not letting someone finish a sentence, right? Which is really sad and missing, I think, in this day and age, for sure. How can we provide those opportunities for children, for students, for young adults to sharpen their saw, so to speak? Empathy. Understanding other people's problems. Walking in their shoes. Not pitying them, but empathizing, putting yourself in someone else's place. And then finally, being a good critical thinker and problem solver, and making those connections across very complex areas and problems that are there. So how do you figure these things out? How do you see how things are connected over time? So the reason why I put this slide up is there are only a few things that we can't get back, right? We know this. Stone after we throw it, the word after it's said, the tweet, the occasion after it's missed, and then finally, time after it's gone. One of the things I'm trying to discipline myself with is not to go too fast, too soon. That is the kiss of death for anybody who comes into any new leadership position, is to move in, take a flamethrower to everything, knock it all down, build it up. That is not the way to do things. That is not what I intend to do whatsoever. A, the board would never allow me, and B, I would never want to do that anyway. So, how do we do this? But there is a sense of urgency as far as I'm concerned, because this school district, for the 2 months that I've been here, is doing some really incredible things. But I will say, in the very short time that I've been here, I know there are lots of things that we can totally augment and upgrade and make it better. I know that for a fact. Like technology. So, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, if you ever heard this, but I didn't believe it until I actually saw a video. Even though you can't even believe videos anymore because of the way things are going. But this is true. If you ever decide to go into the wild and catch a monkey, I don't recommend it, but if you ever did, there is a surefire way to do it. That is, you can hollow out the coconut, put something in there that the monkey wants. Here's what's going to happen. The monkey's going to put his or her hand in there, grab the item that it wants, and when it tries to pull its hand out, it's not going to be able to fit, and it's stuck. The hand is stuck. It's holding on to something for dear life, and it's not letting it go. The reason why I share that is because I believe, and I'm certainly guilty of this, I have lots of ideas that I don't like to let go of. They're very comfortable. I've been doing it for 20 years. I'll keep doing it for 20 years, even though the research may say it's not a good idea that we continue that. Other people, other countries, other school districts are doing X, Y, and Z, universal best practices, right? How do we incorporate some of those things? Well, I'm not doing it because I am not giving up this, whatever this is. I don't know what this is in our school district. But again, all I'm asking us to do is to consider the ideas that we are holding near and dear, to suspend certainty once again, and talk about things maybe that are somewhat new and different. Simon Sinek is all over YouTube. Lots of great TED Talks. He talks about what great organizations do, and what they do is they learn from others. They learn from other places. And they're not fearful of taking risks and trying new things. One of the ways that we grow, not only as people, but as organizations. So what I'm asking us to consider and to think about is what's happening around this world, in schools, in other countries, that are deemed successful, whatever that even means, right? How do we even define success? And I'll show you at least what some of the data is suggesting. The OECD, those of you who don't know, it's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They do a whole host of things. They just came out with a report a few years ago talking about, and I don't agree with all of them, not even close, but there are some suggestions, right, as far as they talk about improving economic and social well-being of people all around the world. They have some suggestions as far as what schools can possibly do that are pretty interesting. Also, the World Economic Forum. It's been around since 1971, and basically what they do is they shape global, regional, and industry agendas for making the world a better place. They have these conventions. They talk about best practices, different ideas. They also have a report as far as what schools can possibly do all around the world. I've unpacked that. And it's very interesting as far as what they suggest. One of them is getting a new clicker. So, let's talk about, not that we care about test scores, that is the end all be all, but I will talk about the international stage and what's been happening since 2000. There is an assessment that's been around, as I said, since 2000 that targets 15-year-olds all around the world, all different countries, and I'm sure you hear about it every 3 years. The U.S. is ranked 23rd in math, 29th in language, 31st in science, depending on the year. It changes from year to year. And then you look at what's happening. By the way, it stands for the Program of International Student Assessments. Okay, and each year they rotate what they're going to really focus on, whether it's language, arts, or languages, whether it's mathematics or science. The 2018 test, the results come out in December of this year, if you care. The reason why I'm showing this, when you look at, for the most part, over the years, and what the trends are of successful countries, you have a host of countries like Canada, Finland, China, Singapore, that score very well. And you say to yourself, well, why are they doing that? And some of us may be saying, well, what's America doing or not doing? And there's a whole host of reasons why America is where it is. And I'm sure you can think of some right now. And it's not because the public schools are bad, I can tell you that right now, not even close. They're exceptional. But when you look at the trends, what are those countries doing that we can learn from? When you look at the name, before I can do that, if you look at all the countries that are tested, America's pretty much right in the middle. And it's been like that for a very long time. When you look at the national level, where New York State fares, again, we're pretty much either in the middle or in the bottom third. And the question becomes, well, why is that? What are some of the reasons why? And again, I can sit here for hours talking about maybe this, maybe that, but the reality is, this is something that's been happening for a while. The NAEP, which is administered to schools all around the United States, National Assessment for Education Progress, and you can see these different scores. And then you get down to the local level, which is us right here. Right? And I look at the data here over the past several years, because you can't just look at 1 year. You have to look for trends. And we do very well. You know, what's the ultimate exit outcome? It's graduation rate. Well, for the most part, I know you don't, unless you have like 2010 vision, you can see what that says. So let me share with you. For the most part, we're between 91, 93, 94, 95% graduation rate. That's not bad. In my estimation, it should be much higher. And that's what we will strive for, right? Together. Not just pockets of us, but all of us. When you dig down even deeper into the subgroups, and you see how our students are faring. Females are outperforming males over the years. When you look at our most vulnerable populations, which is our students with disabilities, their graduation rates hover somewhere between 50s and 60s, 70%. We hit an 80% once, which is actually very, very good, well above the state average. But again, it should be higher. And then our E&L population, which is in the 20s and 30s. And again, there's a whole host of reasons why that is the case. And the question becomes, what are we going to do about that together? College success. I know this is something that our community really, really honors, is very proud of. And when you look at our 4-year graduation rate leaving here, how many go to a 4-year college, it's very, very high. Extremely high. Even going to 2-year colleges, very high. My contention is, and this is where I get in trouble. I can't even deny it because it's being live streamed, so I can't even say I didn't even say that. But here's the reality, and I really believe this. Not every child has to go to college in order to be successful. I really believe that. They can go to vocational, they can go into the trades, they can go into the military, and they will have a wonderful life. And for some reason or another, there is a stigma that's attached to the fact that kids, if they don't go to a 4-year college, then they are, I'm not saying here, I'm just saying universally, they are perceived as less than. And I just don't agree with that whatsoever. So the question becomes, what can we do as a school district to make sure all of our students have a choice? If they choose to go to a 4-year, a 2-year, an Ivy, a state school, the military, vocational trades, what skill sets do they need in order to be successful? How do we make sure we have that in place here and work our way down? So there is something that's going around the world, and it's concerning to me, and maybe it is to you. I'll talk about this in a little bit. Exactly. The big thing has to do with in China. I don't know if you heard about this. It was in the New York Times. There was a 5-year-old that had a 15-page resume talking about all their accomplishments around the world. That's the extreme. But I'm going to tell you right now, my humble opinion, that this is what's going to happen at some point. We are making sure that childhood, as far as 5, 6, 7-year-olds, are in many ways creating resumes in order to be successful in life, whatever that means. I talk about the fact that we are serving a generation of children, of students, who are more anxious, depressed, and suicidal than any generation before. It's a fact. And the data suggests not only why is that happening, but what can we do not only as a school, but as a community to combat that. Now, if I was to say to you, if students did something for 45 minutes a day, half hour a day, every day, it was free, and if you did this, it would decrease anxiety, decrease unwanted behaviors, increase all the good things that are happening, I think most of you would say, sign me up. But the problem becomes is that when people find out what it is, they think it has, again, a stigma that's attached to it that is less than. And what I mean by that is play is very important work for kids. And I'm not just talking kindergartners and first graders. I'm talking for middle school kids. I'm not saying kids going out and playing kickball. I'm talking about activities where it's unstructured, they figure things out, they make their own rules, they figure out how to work with other people, they make choices, and it's unstructured and it's at different levels, meaning that back in the day when I was growing up, I wasn't just playing with 9-year-olds when I was 9, I was playing with 11-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 7-year-olds, all at the same time, and we all learned from each other. And what's happened over time is
those opportunities have been stripped away. And there is a byproduct of that that is not, I believe, in the best interest of kids. So how do we create those opportunities? If you look at Dr. Peter Gray and look at his research in Boston College, anybody who's in education knows who David Elkind is. Their research is so rich and longitudinal in nature that it really spells it all out. The question becomes, how do we design those opportunities for kids in the school day, especially in a very high-performing school district, where it doesn't look like or feel like we are taking away or lowering standards. And there's no doubt in my mind that we can do it. And it's already happening, more important. So very quickly, when I ask what's the purpose of education, I just have a few slides from some famous people who went through the school systems. And, well, for the most part, this is taken in the 20s or 30s, I think. It really hasn't changed much, except for a whiteboard for the most part, right? If you went to school in the 70s, you had the film strip projector, right? You remember that? You had chalk, all that stuff. Now, it's everyone's in rows still, for the most part. And then we started asking ourselves, what is the meaning? So if you can't read that, it says, what is the meaning of life? And then he says, I don't know, the computer's down. We become so reliant on technology and education. Sometimes it's important we take that journey inward, and it's just as important as that journey outward. Is this the purpose of life? School for 12 years, college for 4 more, then you work and then you die. That's it. I don't think that's the case. I know you don't think that's the case. But in some way, shape, or form, 85% of people in America don't like the job that they're in. They work to get to the end of the week, wait for the weekend, and then they rinse and repeat. I don't want that for your kids. And I'm assuming you don't want that for your children as well. So then the question becomes, how do they find out what their talents are and what their potential is? And how good can they be at something? You look at Picasso, it says the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of it is to give it away. I believe that's what our educators do every single day. Their purpose is to serve your children at the highest capacity, and in my estimation, they do an extraordinary job, and so do our administrators. So I've said this before, kids are in school for about 14,000 hours. It's a very typical scene. You know what this is like in May or June, right? You see this? This hasn't really changed much. I could probably show you the same picture from decade after decade. You see this? My estimation, children are not standardized. I'd like to think that. I have 5 children, right? They're all distinctly different. Very different. Some I don't think are mine, like they're just different, right? If you have more than one child at home, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We need to honor those differences, honor those talents. It's a great study. I got about 10 minutes left, and then I'm going to open up for questions. This really gets to the heart of the matter. Longitudinal study. Kindergarten students, about 1,500 of them, all take a test on divergent thinking. It's talked about in the book Breakpoint and Beyond. Ted Robinson talks about it in one of his famous TED Talks. Basically, convergent thinking is multiple choice tests, right? One problem, one answer. Divergent thinking, one problem, lots of different ways to attack it, lots of different ways to figure it out. That's real life for the most part, right? For the most part. So 1,500 kids, they're given an assessment on divergent thinking, and what percentage do you think of the 1,500 kindergartners scored at the genius level? Genius level. 98%. Here's an example. Here's a paperclip. Think of 200 ways to use a paperclip. They can do it. You give it to me, it's paper one. All right? Same group of kids were tested 5 years later, divergent thinking. It did not go to 100%. It went down to 32%. That means when they were in 4th grade, went from 98 down to 32%. Their ability to think and stay outside the box, multiple ways to attack the problem, went down. 5 years later, tested them again, went down to less than 9%. Then, on top of that, they took a couple 25-year-olds and they tested them at 25. 2%. So the question becomes, I know it's one study, but it's either kids get really bad, their cognitive capabilities are declining, or something potentially is not happening within our schools that allows them to think creatively and in a different way. It's something to consider, and I think it's amazing. Famous people. I love Paul McCartney, I love the Beatles, that's the only reason why I put it up there. Anyway, Albert Einstein. You've probably heard lots of his quotes about what he thought about school. Mark Twain. Winston Churchill, I have no idea how much he did not like school. Now some of you probably going, all right, well I guess guys just didn't like school. That's not true. You know the famous writer? Author? You know who Anne Sullivan is? An amazing woman. Her thoughts about school. Now you're probably going, all right, this is from like the 1900s, 1800s. What about now? I get that. So I'm getting there. Now we're in the 50s. Love Margaret Mead. You know about all of her quotes, right? Very interesting. I try to be current. That's not current, according to my daughter. And I am close. She's like, you're about 12 years off. What's wrong with you? If you look at his songs, his raps, and you read them as poetry, it's actually frightening how creative this gentleman is. And then one of my wife's favorite people. She tested to get into college, couldn't even get in, she barely graduated high school. Didn't even go to university. Probably, at the time, one of the most influential people in the world. So why am I sharing this with you? Like, this is really depressing. Like, why are you doing this to me? And the only reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I want you to start thinking about what can be potentially in our school system, which is, what is the purpose? Why are we here? Why are we serving our amazing children in Fort Washington? John Dewey, for those of you who love educational history, one of the forefathers of public education for sure. I like that. It is an active and constructive process. The whole purpose of education is to turn mirrors into windows. I like that. I think we're getting closer for sure. So here are some of the questions that I'm asking as I'm going around speaking to so many different people that I'm thankful for. Some of them, I'm hoping they don't upset me. Why are so many children overscheduled before, during, and after school? Like, when did this happen? Saturday mornings, my mom was like, get out of the house, it's 9 o'clock. Super friends are over, boom, get out. Maybe come home for go play with your friends in the summer. Come back for dinner. And then when the streetlights go out, you come back inside. And you're playing all day long, you're doing things all day long. Those days are over. And it's not because the world is a more dangerous place, I will say that. Why is recess and play on the endangered species list soon to be extinct? Not here, thank goodness. How do we know if a student, school, or district is successful? How do we define success? What are our thoughts about what that actually means? How would we as a community define what a successful school district is? What are other successful school districts doing outside of where we are, not only in the United States, but around the world? So Ken Robinson talks about what education is. He talks about the gardener does not make a plant grow, the job of the gardener is to create optimal conditions. Now I think we're getting closer. What do we have control over within our schools, in our classrooms, in our community? Those are the things I want us to focus on. And that is definitely something. Environment, climate, and I don't mean, 68 degrees. I'm talking about relationships, expectations, support, balance. We know the human system, right, has a lot of different subsystems, right? And if one of our subsystems is out of whack, you know what happens. I catch a cold, I'm out for 4 days. My wife is like, you're a big baby, what's wrong with you? Everything is impacted by that one little subsystem being out of whack. It's the same thing for schools. Schools are an amazing organic organization that is built on subsystems. Parent-student relationship. I'm sorry, parent-teacher relationship. Teacher-student relationship. Principal-teacher-student relationship. Superintendent and the Board of Education and the community. All those things, especially here, come into effect. And when things are congruent and you're firing on all cylinders is when you are, in my estimation, achieving the best we can do. Now, when it comes to technology, this is happening more and more. You know, like after a while, if you have an iPhone, I'm not sure if it's the same thing for Androids, it tells you how long you're on your phone for the day. And then when I see that, I get nauseous. Because I think I'm so hyper-cognizant of that. Clearly I'm not. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Or I should say, like, what the heck are you doing? Are you even working? If you're on the phone all the time? That's just but this is true in some ways, right? And this is where mental health comes in. When you start looking at the data, and more technology usage, more screen time with kids, what the evidence is suggesting, and in some cases highly suggesting, more usage, there is increase in anxiety, depression, a whole host of other things. And I know anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations and tendencies, there's a lot more going on than just using your phone, for sure. It's something, though, that we have to, I believe, continue to investigate. The other thing is, moving is critically important. I feel so badly for you because you've been sitting there for 45 minutes, which means if I was sitting there, I would be like, oh my gosh, when is he done? Right? But the reality is, if you are moving, that's part of the reason why I am moving, and you're moving for more than 20 minutes, your brain is ready. It's ready to learn. It's ready to grow. It's ready to synthesize, analyze information. And yet, in many cases, we have our kids sit all day long. I know some schools, not here, but their kids are sitting all day long. All day long. And that is not healthy, not only for your body, but definitely not for your brain. And we're talking about creating environments that are conducive to learning. That's it. That's not it. Moving is where it's at, for sure. I had the opportunity to visit a few countries. Dubai was one of them, areas, I'll say, around the world. Finland was another. I got to pick this gentleman's brain. He's the Director General for the Finnish National Agency for Education. Basically what that means is he's in charge of education in Finland. Why do you care about Finland? Well, for the most part, since 2000, it's either 1, 2, or 3, occasionally 4, in the 3 different areas I said before. And as a country, and I know, 6 million people, most of us think, it's homogenous. It's not as much as you think it is. If you take New York State, almost the same population for the most part, as far as size too, 23% unemployment rates in some parts of Finland, lots of immigrants immigrating there, sure, all around the world. The reality is, though, what does he care about? As in this title, one of them is emphasizing well-being. Not only for the children, but just as important, for the teachers and for the people who are serving children. He cares about well-being for all, and how do we develop policies that focus on well-being? The other has to do with trusting educators, trusting their ability to make professional judgments. When I ask them how are teachers rated, how are they ranked and sorted, how are they observed, He looked at me like I had 4 different heads. He's like, what are you talking about? They do it themselves. They do it to each other. They hold each other accountable. I'm not saying that's the way we're going. I'm saying that we need to value, and I know our teachers and educators and our administrators are highly valued here. I talked about shadowing the student. I plan to do that, hopefully at every single grade level. And it's not to check in to see what the adults are doing. I can care less. I want to see what it's like. I haven't been a third grade student since the 70s. I haven't taught third grade since the 90s. And let me tell you something. It is radically different from the 70s and the 90s. That is for sure. I plan on holding roundtable discussions with our 5th graders, with our 8th graders, and our outgoing seniors. I want to know what they're thinking and feeling. I want our administrators to join us and ask them questions. What's working? What's not working? What can we do better? So here's the plan for this year. And thank you for being as patient as you have been. I really appreciate it. Right now, I'm in the comprehensive organizational review phase, which is a very technical term for I want to see what's going on at all different phases, all different facets. What's happening in HR, what's happening in their budget, what's happening for curriculum and instruction. Talking to people, looking at data. I'm trying to collect as much information as I can and suspend certainty about what I think, why things are happening. What's happening is I'm turning over rocks and asking questions and trying not to turn them back over and say, maybe I'll talk about that or think about that some other time. My responsibility to our wonderful Board of Education is for me to say, this is what I'm noticing, this is what I'm thinking. At some point, here's a plan we can all come together and build. So I'm meeting with lots of people. I'm asking questions, what's working and why. Like when I ask, what's the utopian Port Washington School District look like? If money was no object, if mandates were stripped away, if you said, this is what I want in every single school, how do we make that happen? Sometimes we don't think about those things. Like we always say, well, I wish we had this. We talk about things around the outer fringes. But what are some of the things that we want to see? What can we augment, improve, remove? And then selfishly, in order for me to stick around and not get booted out or get out of here, what do I need to do? What do you think I need to do in order for me to be successful serving you, serving our community, and most important, serving our students? What's the graduate profile? How, at some point, are we going to design, when our kids exit our school system, what are the non-negotiable attributes that we want them to possess? Defining what those things are and then working our way backwards. How do we do that? Relationships are very important, so I plan on speaking to you a lot. Now, I will say this. I know some of you, actually all of you here probably are receiving fireside chats, so this is part of the communication process. Some of you are like, yeah, I like that. Some of you are like, you better stop calling me at 7 o'clock on Sunday. And you better figure out a different way to do it. See, now, that information is extremely important to me. So then, I receive that. Then, how do we design a different system to send it out to people who only want to hear it? And if they want to read about it at some point, we can send that out as well, right? So those are the things. That feedback loop is extremely important. Finally, then, we will start really honing in on curriculum and instruction, budget and finance, lots of capital improvements. You know, every time you turn around, there's something else being built. It's an exciting time to be here. There are lots of upgrades. But then we have to think, past 5 years, what else do we need here to make our schools more efficient, more effective? Technology and then communication and public relations. In May, once I gather all my information, I have this little blue book going on blue book number 2, where I'm writing down everything I'm hearing from everybody, putting it down. I'm going to talk about it at a state of the district sometime in either April or May. I'm talking to the Board of Education as far as narrowing down that date. Basically, it's going to talk about where we were, where we are and where we're heading toward. Each year, that type of presentation will take place. For now, that's what it is. I know it's a very comprehensive, that I took way too much time. My apologies. I want to make it a little bit different than the first meet and greet, and I hope you got something out of it. I know at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm thinking about 10 minutes for questions. Now, here's the way I would like to do this. If your question does not get answered, I'm going to ask that you come up and see me afterwards. Write down your email address. I will make sure either Denise or Jackie reaches out to you. We have a conversation either on the phone or we can set an appointment where we can meet face to face. Okay, so if you don't want to ask a question here, you would rather ask one-on-one, that's totally fine. Okay? So at this point, I'd like to open it up to any questions or concerns or cries of outrage. Okay, thank you. Seriously, no other questions? Well then, I want to, oh, okay, here we go. Hold on. So the question was, in my previous school district, where were we as far as planning, and then how much was completed? So my previous school district, I was there for 5 years. The first year was this, right? Listening to people, forming committees to talk about where we wanted to go. The second year then was designing what those changes potentially would be, and how, most importantly, how do you budget for those things? Because we know anything you want to change for the most part, unless you go out here and pay Paul to fund it, you would then have to make sure there's money to support it. So I can tell you, if I was to guess, percentage-wise, I would say about 85 to 90% was in completion for the 5-year plan. So one of the things that we did was all the playgrounds were brand new. That was budgeted for. That was something that was very important for the school district. There was a CTE high school that was created for our students, career and technical education for our students, because we wanted to not only save money sending kids to BOCES, but let's have them stay in the school district that they were in and create programs for them. Built a greenhouse for all of our students to use at the high school. And then there was something about redistricting, which is never easy, right? So how do you either go and redraw district lines where students would go to school? So there was a whole bunch of conversations, many conversations as far as redesigning where those district lines are from an equity and a parity standpoint to make sure that all the elementary schools and the 3 middle schools all receive the same types of thing. And so that was done as well. So a lot taking place during those years, and my estimation is they will continue to do some really, I think, innovative and progressive things as well. Any other questions? Up here? Back here?
I have a question. You had made some comments before about, different outcomes for our students, like vocational school, 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges. I'm wondering how do you tailor your curriculum, or how you plan to tailor your curriculum to account for these different student levels?
Great. So the question is, how do you tailor your curriculum for students who potentially go on a 4-year or 2-year college route, or let's say vocational technical education route? And the answer is, I don't know yet. And that's not a that is me hearing that question, sharing it with my administrative team in district office, speaking to our teachers and principals, most importantly sharing that with the board, and then creating a plan to do that. I think the question becomes, is that something that we value and want as a school community? Because there are some things that I'm sharing with you that may not be congruent with what the community is looking for. I mean, that's just a fact. But my humble opinion, I think if we want to get to as close to a 100% graduation rate, especially for all different subgroups, I believe, and I think just as important, New York State believes, there are multiple pathways and multiple ways to do that. The question becomes, how as a school district do we create those opportunities? And at this point, until I really know everything and how we go about our business, and again, it's not a cop-out, I'm not quite sure. I'm hoping if you ask the same question next year, I will certainly have a better answer.
I'm a retired man, school teacher, and I don't have children. So how do I keep in the loop? I don't even know how I heard about school teachers raise up as a community member, interested in the future of children and how I come down on it.
Okay, so the question is, how do you, if you're out of the loop, meaning that if you're not affiliated, let's say by working here or have a child in the school district, how do you know what's going on? That's part of one of the board's goals, is communicating, I believe, more effectively, not only with people who reside within the school district, but who are on the outside. So I think right now we're looking at different avenues to pursue. One of them was a fireside chat, but we're going to redesign that for sure. I think there are other social media ways to do it. I think we have a PR firm that I think is pretty exceptional that will design different ways to make sure that everyone knows what's going on. But that's going to be a process that will certainly take time, but it is one of the board's goals for sure. Two more questions? Yes. You're all in the back. 10,000 steps.
Speaking a lot about play and structure design, what's your philosophy?
Speaking a lot about play, value, and structure. What's your philosophy?
All right, so the question is, what is my philosophy on homework? Homework is like one of those words that have lots of emotions attached to it, like politics, money, some other words I'm sure we can think of. I can tell you philosophically, my thoughts about homework revolve around two things. What is the purpose of it? So if it's a reinforcement, how much do we give, I think is a question. I look at our homework policy, and I have to say, I like our homework policy as far as what we have. My humble opinion, this is my opinion, doesn't mean it's going to become a fact here, is I'm not a big fan of giving homework just to give something kids to do, to say that we're doing it. If it's purposeful, if it's not too long, I don't believe in second shifts, especially for elementary kids. So when I see first grade, I'm not saying here by the way, but when I see first graders or second graders, and at times they have an hour and a half, 2 hours of homework, developmentally, I just don't think it's a good idea. So it really comes down to what is the purpose, how often is it, and I think there are some policies out there, again, I'm not saying anything about homework policy, but there are some policies that that prohibits homework on the weekends, or on vacations, or for extended periods of time. For me though, what I found both, I will say as a parent, and I think just as important as an educator, I am not a big fan of kids, especially at high school. Now AP courses, listen, you know when you're taking an AP course, you know what you're getting into, right? So you know, going in, you're going to have hours of homework. You can take multiple AP courses. But I will say, if you're in middle school and you have 2 to 3 hours of homework, in my humble opinion, I'm just not a fan of that. So I believe in longitudinal projects. Like, here's what I'm not a fan of. Everyone's going to do odd numbers 1 through 50. Right? And I'm not saying it happens here. I always like to put a disclaimer out. I'm not saying it happens here, but I've seen it a million times. 1 through 50, right? Odd numbers, and then it's never checked. Like, what's the point of that? And then what if you do them all wrong? And then it's reinforcing bad habits, right? So it goes back to the balance slide. I think anything in balance, right? Whether it's homework, whether it's food, whether it's anything, if you know where that balance is and we define where that is, that's the best way to go. When it comes to Homework for sure at the primary, when I say primary, K through 2, not a big fan of too much. What I'm a big fan of is quality time with family, literacy. So if kids are going home, children are going home and they're reading and they're sharing, those things I think are incredibly important. And then they start building on those skills as they get older. So that's my personal opinion about homework. All right, one more question? Yes, ma'am.
Their opinion on class size.
Can we turn that video on? No, I'm kidding. Okay. So the question is about class size. You know, it's really interesting. So I will say, as a teacher, I loved when I had classes of 21, 22, 23. I loved it. As a principal, I loved seeing class sizes of 16, 17, and 18, right? Because it allows those incredible relationships to flourish, I believe. It gets very difficult when you start seeing, especially at the elementary and middle school for sure, when you're getting close to 27, 28, 29, you know, especially when your classrooms are tight, you know, and it's like you're trying to move around just to get to Joe or Bill or Jill, and it takes like 20 minutes because there's no room. Very, very difficult. That's when I talk about classroom environment and how important it is. So class size for me, I know there are certain provisions, you know, here in Fort Washington. I mean, I would love to see, as I'm trying not to look at Mary Callahan, I would love to see class sizes in all grades, especially at the high school, at a lower level, right? But the reality is, if we had all class sizes reduced to the teens or to the low 20s, we would probably have to hire a lot more teachers and or look to remove some of the things that are in place to pay for those things. So the research shows two different things depending on who you talk to. I believe lower class size is in the best interest of everybody. For sure. Yes.
Support the teachers and ensure that we get their feedback on the classes.
All right, so the question, and I'm going to make this the final question just because I know the Jets are probably losing. So the question becomes, support the teachers, do they have access to speak with me? And, you know, I've said this many times. Well, first of all, I work with a wonderful administrative team. So it's not just me, it's all the district office administrators that we do a wonderful job supporting. But my door is always open. I think Denise, who is my right hand in my office, her head's about to explode, because I think I had like 9 meetings today, meeting with a whole host of people from around the community. But when it comes to educators, so I spoke with 7 teachers today. Just today, asking their opinions about X, Y, or Z. I have something called Caffeine with Mike. Twice a month, once in the morning, once in the evening. That's open to anybody, meaning that there can be teachers who work here, community members, sharing their thoughts. I think the hardest thing to do is to gather information and to make sure it's an eclectic mix of people who are within our community. But I definitely want to hear from all of our educators, and not just the teachers, but the support staff as well. The support staff do incredible things working for kids. So anybody who touches the lives of children in any way, shape, or form, I want to hear from them. And my hope is, by the end of the year, I have at least talked to every single teacher here. Whether it's for 2 seconds, I can turn the show, hey, how's it going, give me something, or we sit down and have a more formal conversation. Okay? With that, I'm going to say thank you so much for coming. If you would like to talk at any other point, please let me know. Everyone have a wonderful night, and thank you for coming. Very much.